Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those who are new, my name is Olivia and I am a type 1 diabetic and have been so for just about 20 years now. Today, I'm here to talk to you guys about the Dexcom G7. Now, I did the Dexcom G6, the previous version, the older version, and I also have done the G7. The G7 I have done for about 6 months now, and the G6 I did for a few years, quite a few years in fact. And I'm here to tell you guys a little bit about the differences as well as the pros and cons of both. So, as a little bit background to me, I am a type 1 diabetic. I have been so for about 20 years and I have 2 toddlers. So, especially through pregnancy, it was so important to me to have a continuous glucose monitor. Up until I started the Dexcom, I was just doing finger pricks, which was extremely challenging. And I'm so glad that I converted to the Dexcom before having children, because now that I have 2 kids that I'm constantly running after, I would never have a chance to stop what I was doing to prick myself, washing my hands before and after, using alcohol swabs. I just do not have the time for that. And I am now in the simplistic life where I'm trying to make my life as simple as humanly possible. And the Dexcom helps me get there. So let's get into what the main differences of the Dexcom G6 and G7 were. So to start, I'm going to show you what my Dexcom looks like. It is right there, and it's a small little button. So I unfortunately do not have the Dexcom G6 on me, but the Dexcom G7 is 60% smaller in size than the G6 was. Also, as you can see, I wear it on the back of my arm, whereas the Dexcom G6 I always wore on my abdomen. So one of my biggest frustrations with the Dexcom G6 was that it was a little bit larger, and also I wore it on my abdomen. And I felt like it was constantly getting caught on things that would rip it off. And previously, Dexcom used to be fantastic about calling them, and they would send you a replacement, a free replacement to replace the one that had fallen off. I'll get into this a little bit later, but since then, Dexcom's not doing so great with that anymore. But regardless, whenever it would pop off, I would give Dexcom a call, explain what happened, and they would send me out a complimentary Dexcom device. Also, a big difference that I have noticed is that the Dexcom sensor and transmitter is all one device here with the G7. Whereas previously with the Dexcom G6, I had to purchase the sensors and the transmitter. The transmitter was good for 3 months, and the sensors you replaced every 10 days. So there were 2 separate prescriptions that you constantly had to make sure you were on top of to make sure that your device could work properly. Whereas the Dexcom G7, all I have to do is purchase one device, and I'll show you right now what that is. So this is an unused Dexcom. Comes with a big giant patch of instructions and a little over patch to put on. I have my over patch on right now. It just goes right around the device to make sure it doesn't fall off. And this. So this is how you're going to put it on. And before, you would put something similar onto this and you would stick it onto yourself, and then you would snap the transmitter into the patch. Whereas now, the whole device is in here. So I only have to purchase this. You stick it on yourself, you press the button, and it goes right in, and it's that easy. It's a lot easier than the old process used to be, but the old process did work as well, but I love the fact that it's cheaper. I know when I was doing my research on Google, it said that the G7 is technically more expensive than the G6. However, I'm taking into account the fact that I do have health insurance, so I pay copays and prescription copays for my device. And I'm only paying for one device here, whereas the previous G6 version, I was paying for 2. So previously, I was paying on the previously on the G6, I was paying $250 in total for both prescriptions every 3 months. Whereas this one, I was paying $125 every 3 months just for this. So that was half the price that I was used to paying for. So starting the G7 was actually like a discounted program for me. So I was very grateful for that big change. So in addition to the price differences and the smaller size and the application process, also the G7 has a shorter warm-up period. So when I put this on and I'm warming it up through my iPhone, because they are iPhone compatible, it takes 30 minutes from start to finish to start getting blood sugar readings. The old G6 version took 2 hours. And for any diabetic out there, you know that 2 hours makes such a huge difference when you're keeping track of your blood sugar. In 2 hours, so many things can happen. You can go to DKA, you can pass out from low blood sugar, you can have so many issues. Whereas 30 minutes, that's a lot more manageable. So once I put this on, after 30 minutes, I start getting blood glucose readings, and it's just quick like that. The 30 minutes flies by, whereas the 2 hours used to drag. And I remember I would always get very panicked if I was due to put a new G6 device on right before bed, because then I was going to bed and I was not going to be awake, and I was just going to trust that everything was okay. And previously, a lot of my blood sugar issues were happening in the middle of the night. So I would be so worried for the 2 hours while I was sleeping that something bad was going to happen and Dexcom would not be able to notify me. Whereas now, 30 minutes is a lot more manageable. So I love that change as well. Another big change with the Dexcom G7 is that once the 10 days is up and you ran the end of the cycle, you get a 12-hour grace period to get a new device on. And I love that. And I'm a penny pincher. So I almost always run the grace period out so I can keep it on for 10.5 days versus 10. So the 12 hours was amazing, whereas the previous G6 version, once you ran out, that's it. You were done. You had to replace it. You weren't getting any blood glucose readings. So I love that as well. And now to kind of get into more of a personal story than concrete facts. Although it is a concrete fact, I saw that the G7 is supposedly more accurate. But as a type 1 diabetic, I can attest that it is accurate. So I wore the G6 through my pregnancies. And there were so many times where my Dexcom would say low or high, and it was actually the opposite. And I know that in the moment, a lot of the doctors had said, oh, you know, Dexcom has an issue when you put pressure on it, it can misread your blood sugar. But it happened quite a few times where my sugars were 100 points off from what they actually were, and I was finger pricking myself constantly to check against it. Since starting the G7, I've barely had to question my readings. And when I do question it, because every 10 days when I put a new one on, I do blood check to make sure it's accurate, and it is almost 100% accurate 100% of the time, which is huge. Because if anyone has seen my previous videos about my opinions of diabetes and technology, you know that I'm a skeptic. I don't trust devices. I don't trust technology to tell me how to live my life and what's best. So the G6 really made me nervous. But the G7 has really done a good job making me feel confident that it's giving me the correct information. Because if it is not giving me the right information, and my sugar drops drastically low, and my husband's at work and he's reading Dexcom and it says, oh, her sugar's 100, you're good, you're good. But in reality, my sugar's really 50 and I'm passed out on the couch unconscious. How's he ever gonna know about that until he gets home from work that day? It's such a problem. And if you're not diabetic, one of the most scariest things in life is going unconscious with your blood sugar and just trusting that someone's going to find you, because you don't know that someone's always going to find you. And maybe someone will eventually find you, but how long from that point will it be for them to find you? That's a totally different story. I'm making myself sound way scarier than it actually is. But the Dexcom G7 so far has been so accurate, so great, and it almost never falls off. The G6 I wore on my abdomen, and I also wore it when I was very pregnant, and I remember those things would just fly off, always. You would get it stuck somewhere, or my kids would grab it and pull it off, whereas the G7 is almost like invisible. It's so slim, it's so hard to see, but like you can see how little that is. Like, it's a little tablet, and I have a 3-year-old who is inquisitive about everything right now, and he never even inquires about it. It's just there. You can't really feel it. I can rub the back of my arm and it kind of blends in, just a little bit of bump, whereas the G6 was more noticeable. It was bigger and it took up more room, even though it was on my stomach. So the G7 has definitely been a positive change because of that as well. And then lastly, one thing I do want to talk about with the G7, and I'm not sure if the company started doing this when they updated the product to the G7, but you only get 3 free devices a year. 3. Now, previously, almost all of my Dexcoms would fall off. The G6 was terrible with that. They would fall off even if you put the overpatch on. Even if you put an overpatch on top of the overpatch, they were constantly falling off. So I was on the phone with Dexcom multiple times a month getting replacement products sent out to me. And recently, whenever I call, because I'm not going to lie to you, this has fallen off a few times, they only give you 3 replacements. 3 Goodwill replacements, that's it. And they are very firm on that, I must add. So if you do get the G7 and have the product fall off on you, just know that you're only going to get 3 replacements, which I kind of find to be a little bit inconvenient. I don't love that the company did that because I know that some people probably take advantage of the system and probably call constantly to get over on the healthcare system. No one wants to spend a ton of money on their disability. No one wants to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on diabetes. I completely 100% can agree with that. But when it falls off, they should send a replacement. So with the G7, that has been one of the downsides. But in turn, it also has not been falling off as much. So I haven't been running into the issue where I need to call them as much. So if you're looking to get the Dexcom, or if you're debating whether to get the G6 or the G7, I've kind of weighed up the pros and cons. Overall, I would 100% recommend the G7. One, because it's cheaper, it's smaller, it's more effective, and overall, I think it is a better product. So I would definitely recommend that one. If anyone has any questions about my experience with the Dexcom, or you want to share your experience, leave it in the comments below. Please like this video and subscribe if you're new. If you're interested in seeing more diabetic content, please subscribe to my channel and I will not disappoint. I will see you guys in the next one. Have a great day and go Eagles. Have a good one.